Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have Jason Phelps, owner of Phelps Game Calls. Jason, how you doing?
Good. Very busy this time of year, but it's better than the opposite, so we're doing really good here.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions in regards to, obviously, the owner of Phelps Game Calls, and you have a wide variety of calls, but the elk calls are obviously kind of your mainstay or your staple. I would assume from a sales standpoint you sell a ton of elk calls and you do a bunch of other stuff, but you're right before the season here. A lot of the seasons are kicking off right here, the end of August in a lot of these western states, so I'm sure you're just making elk calls as fast as you can.
Yeah, we're going through more diaphragms are going out than we can put out, so our inventory is getting very low. But yeah, it's we can look back at all the past years, and we always know that July and August is when we do 90% of our business. So we try to ramp up for it, get prepared, look at projections, and then we overshoot them, and then we're behind again.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I've known you for a long time. I think we first met, I don't even know, maybe like 10 years ago at the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation calling contest. I think it was the first time we actually met, and
Yep.
you were starting your calling company, and want to talk a little bit. We're going to talk about all kinds of things today, but I wanted to ask you about some of the growing pains with, obviously your business has grown from when I first met you. It seems like, you're on a bunch of podcasts, you're talking to a lot of people, you have a great marketing program, and you make great calls, so your business has taken off. But talk a little bit about the growing pains of, starting from scratch and wanting to build a big call company, and now you kind of are that big call company. Talk about some of those growing pains, maybe some of the challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis and such.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I can't overlook is the fact that I'm not a businessman. I've become one, I think, over the last 5 or 6 years. But when I got into this, I knew very, very little about business, and I was just a guy that had a passion, and I wanted to build some elk calls. So that was like my first hurdle. Is I just kind of I wasn't really good at planning or preparing for the next big hurdle or inventory issues. So what happened early on is we basically get run into them face on, and then have to deal with them at that point. Well, now as this thing's gotten bigger, we've gotten better, but it's still some of the same issues. Is you're trying to plan for growth, and you're trying to plan for just manpower in general, and then you take that one step further. There's manpower, but then there's skilled labor as well that goes into some of this stuff, and that's really hard, because we know we only really need any additional employees for maybe 3 or 4 months out of the year, and then the rest of the year we can maintain and we can build up inventory and some of those things. So right now my biggest concern is just trying to time manpower and get these things built. As you already mentioned, we've got a fairly good marketing program. I actually handle the majority of that and come up with the ideas. It's just my biggest issue is just loving making the calls, and not necessarily being the best businessman is still kind of our biggest issue. One of our biggest hurdles we probably run into.
Yeah, I'm sure with trying to predict how many calls you're going to sell, and with the amount of marketing and stuff that you do, as far as good publicity, and obviously you make great calls, but getting that publicity out there, and then all of a sudden you get waves of traffic coming in with orders, and you're like, wow, this marketing's really working, and then you probably are going, oh no, I got to get up at 3 in the morning and work for the next 10 days to get these calls out. Making an elk call is not something that's easy, or I should say, making good elk calls is not something that's easy. And I would assume that trying to cut consistent diaphragms, and obviously trying to make all the calls sound good. So whether you've got 100 calls, you want all of them to sound good. Talk a little bit about from a manufacturing standpoint, not only from a labor standpoint, but from a material standpoint, some of the headaches that you probably face on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so there's definitely two sides. There's the the manpower, the labor that goes into it, and then trying to maintain your materials quality from batch to batch and lot to lot of latex and tape and frames, and everything that we build with. So first, you project out and you look at growth, and we're saying, well, we sold X amount of calls last year during this time. We're going to project a 70% increase. So by the end of August, we need to have 1.7 times the amount of calls we sold. And just so you look at, the first thing I do is we've got 4 builders or 5 builders that are fully trained. I trust that their quality is very good, but how much more can you squeeze out of them? Can we get an extra 10 calls an hour out of them? Can we get X amount per week? And I like to think that my builders build at 85 to 90% capacity at all times. So you're not going to squeeze a whole bunch more out of them. And so then you kind of look at, do you hire, I said you can't squeeze, maybe I should say you can't squeeze more out of them with the equipment they have, because I'll kind of come full circle and explain another option we've looked at and we're kind of implementing now. And then you look at, do you hire another employee, and do I need to train somebody and kind of earn their trust? Can you throw them right into production right away? Can their calls be packaged right alongside with the call builders? And that's one thing I probably struggled with the most, is being comfortable handing over, kind of put my name, literally put my name on the call and then put it out there. Is it going to meet, all the requirements? And then third, the thing that we've kind of been leaning towards, and I may have a little bit of an advantage being an engineer by trade and my schooling, is I looked at my equipment we were using, and how can I basically bulletproof the equipment to add efficiency, to add consistency, efficiency in my builder, consistency in the calls. And so I've got some one-of-a-kind state-of-the-art presses, which I've worked with my press builder before, and I've implemented some things like positive stops. We've got air presses now where the call builder never has to lift his hand up to his or her hand up to lift the lever. It's all foot pedal actuated. So that alone we calculated out. We did some test runs, and each builder is able to build 15 more calls an hour. And so you think about that, well, that's not a lot, but in the grand scheme of a whole week, that's a lot of extra calls that I'm able to get out of that same builder that we trust, to build a very, very good call. So we kind of attacked it from the equipment side. They're fail-proof systems. We have positive stops. We have positive pressure, so all the crimps are good. So we kind of buttoned it up from that side. And then from the material side, that is always going to be frustrating. I know there's a lot of talk out there that all latex is created the same, and it's whether they want to say that or not, or other people want to say that, it's not. The material properties are different. Your material from lot to lot, and so we're using a manufacturer that is very, very good. But like anybody, we just had a batch of latex that all came in thin, and I was unwilling to build those calls. I was going to actually, start Dirk Durham, who you know.
Yeah.
Most of the people in the competitive elk calling world know Elk 101. He has a call that we designed together, and he uses a pretty specific piece of Kelly green latex to his specific dimension, and this came in probably 1,000th under. And you're like, oh, 1,000th in anything else besides latex thickness, shouldn't matter, but 1,000th in latex thickness is huge on an elk call, and we were going to actually have to probably not discontinue, but basically back order his call and not produce any for a while, because I was not willing to sacrifice quality. So that's one thing. Every time I get a latex shipment in, I try to test 100 out of 10,000 pieces. So 1%, I'll open a package out and I'll get my micrometer out, and I'll ensure that each piece of latex is within, we usually go 25 10,000. So if we're looking for like an 004-inch piece of latex, I will let an 00375 or an 00425 slide. Like that's kind of my spec range where I'm comfortable building calls on. And so on the diaphragm side, I pay very close attention to that before I hand that latex to any of my builders, because the builders will notice. They can, hey, when I went to pull back tension, or when I went to do this on the call, I can tell that it's thin. They pay attention, but they don't pay attention to the, they're more production wise. So I try to take all of that off their plate. Like if I hand you 10,000 pieces of latex to build this certain call, then they just build, for the most part. A couple of my more experienced builders they'll mic the latex along the way and say, hey, we're getting a couple thin pieces per batch, and just to let you know, and they'll actually throw it out. I'm more willing to throw out a 12-cent piece of latex than to build the call with it.
Absolutely.
And do that. So very, very, I struggled, and it probably held me back from growth a lot earlier in the life of the company. I wouldn't let anybody else build diaphragms. I built everything that came out of the shop up until 3 years ago. So training new builders, making sure that the quality is good. Even our bugle tubes, I will get them. I'll just randomly pull, 4 or 5 out of the lot and just check. I'll cut them in half. Or is our wall thickness what was spec to be? Is our the end smooth enough? And I just kind of check things just because you want them to be right, and I feel that the price we pay for some of these parts, they should be right.
You talk about, they should be right. Obviously, there's times when maybe one will slip through or what have you. From a call manufacturer standpoint, having your name, on each call, how important is it to you that, people get the call and they feel like that, they are consistent? And, in the marketing world that we live in today with, social media and what have you, I mean, one guy gets a call and it's like, oh, this is junk. It's not, how do you handle, and it's not that I've heard it, but I'm sure you've had some feedback from time to time, Phelps game calls, I mean, your name's right on it. How do you handle those situations if someone is just, they're like, hey, I got, 5 calls here, all by Phelps, they're great, and there's one that's a junker. I mean, what do you do in that situation, or does it just, literally make you cringe when you hear that kind of stuff, as far as, because I know you're a perfectionist, and I'm just curious how you handle that kind of stuff.
It's very, very tough, and the first thing I always want to be empathetic with the customer, regardless of, if I hear the story right off the bat and I know that it's not necessarily a call issue. If for some reason they ordered 5 calls and they're like, man, I just can't use this orange amp, and I'm like, well, because it's the thinnest and it's the loosest, there may not be a call you can use, but I still want to listen.
Send it to Jay. Send that one to Jay Scott, right? Send that loose orange amp to Jay Scott. He can use that loose one.
We'll give him I'll give him your address. That'll take care of that. But I want to listen to everybody and hear them out. And so even if I know that it's not necessarily a build issue, it's not necessarily a manufacturing issue, it may just be their calling style, we still try to take care of them. If when it comes from being empathetic with them, what they expected from us as well, and it's not, if we were dealing with $2,000 pairs of binoculars, it'd be very, very tough to run my business model, because how can I give away a $2,000 pair of binoculars because it's, the eye cups aren't what you expected, or something like that. But fortunately for me, we run, a business where the guy's already bought 5 diaphragms. If he needs 1 replaced, even with shipping, I'm still making money on the transaction, and I keep the guy happy. But at the same time, being an elk hunter and expecting the most out of my equipment, I'm able to kind of put myself in his shoes. And it's kind of funny. My wife, who helps manage the business now, she's been on board for the last year. She struggles with the idea, like, well, just because the guy can't use it, why does he need to get a new one? Like, he can use the other 4. and it's very, very tough, like, coming, and it doesn't make a lot of sense a lot of times. But we try to take care of them. There's another thing. While I'm on the podcast, I might as well give another public service announcement. What a lot of people will do, and we've chose to package this, and we may need to rethink it because it's backfiring on us a little bit, is we drop the calls in the plastic baggie and staple them to the backer card, which is great until the people open the calls, run them, and then they when they're wet, when they're right out of their mouth, they will throw them in the baggie and zip it back up. And that is the absolute hardest thing on these calls. And a lot of times I'll get an email or a picture, hey, this was the best call I've ever used on a package, and I took it out to use it again today, and the thing's all wrinkly and the latex is loose and wavy. And I almost always know exactly what happened. We have directions on the back of the packaging. Do not store the call wet. Do not put it back in the bag. And even those people, when we have a note, we will point it out, and we'll just kind of say, hey, don't, to get good life out of them, let these things dry. And we typically will, we still replace the calls, or give them a discount code to reorder. A lot of times the calls will fix themselves if you just set them out and let them dry again. But yeah, we've been very, very fortunate that I actually just looked the other day. Somebody had a question about where our returns or warranty calls are. We're actually below 0.5%, so very, very low on warranty. And that's with the caveat of what we've just been talking about, that I over warranty probably more than I ever should, or most companies ever would.
I want to pick into a couple things that you had just said that I think it's important, and you kind of giggle about the public service announcement and talk about, obviously coming in the little plastic bag and then guys pop it back in the bag. Let's talk about when you're practicing, like, up and, before the season, a lot of guys are out there, practicing with their calls and what have you. How do you actually take your calls that you're going to be using into the field? So you've got, however many you're running, and this is before the season. This is just you blowing in your house or your shop or outside or whatever. Tell me and the listeners exactly what you do, and then I've got some follow-up questions from there.
So I'll give you what I do and then what I would do if I didn't have an unlimited supply of calls. So I'm pretty fortunate that I get I've got a pile of calls sitting all over the house, and I'll try one. And most of the time when I'm practicing up until season, it's just testing their stuff, and I'll play with the call, and I'll just set it on the counter. Now, if I had to go out and hunt with that same batch of calls, I didn't have a never-ending supply. I would use the call, let it dry, and then put it in the refrigerator until I wanted to practice again, just to make sure it's dry. It doesn't necessarily need to be washed off every time. Just let the call dry for 2 or 3 hours on the counter on a paper towel, or just on the counter, and then put it in the refrigerator. Just the worst thing you can do is set it in front of a window, let the sun hit the latex, let it get hot. A lot of people, and I love practicing in the car, but I get a lot of pictures or tagged in a lot of Instagram photos or Facebook photos where they've got a stack of diaphragms on their dash. And that's great because you're practicing, but that call is probably being exposed to 150-degree heat and direct sunlight and just getting baked in there, and that latex. No, I'm not. There's been times when I like a call that gets maybe hit by the sun a little bit, dries out, but that latex
bake it out a little bit.
There's only a limited amount of time where that latex can just get sun baked. That latex doesn't have UV resistance at all, and it will start to degrade, and it'll actually start to get like stress cracks in the latex, and then the call kind of falls on its face. But to get back to your question, if I ordered 5 calls from myself, had them at my house, I would practice with them, set them in the fridge once they're dry, and then get ready to go.
And when you say set them in the fridge, are you meaning like on a paper towel, in no container of any sort? It's just the call sitting in there on its own, or with the other calls in the fridge, nothing over them, nothing on them, nothing like that?
Once they're dry, I don't think it matters as much. You could set them on a plate, in a Tupperware, in a case. You could actually probably put them back in the bag at that time once they're dry. I don't think there's as big an issue. It's just when they're wet is when the issues pop up. So as long as they're in the fridge, cool, dark place. Even doesn't even need to go in the fridge. If you could just throw it in the closet, in the sock drawer, something where it's not getting exposed to heat and sunlight, or even any sort of light, the call's gonna last a long time.
Okay, good. One thing, if I'm getting a little bit of disturbance on our call, if you're on speaker, maybe take it off, and if you're not on speaker, then we'll just keep rolling with it. But back to, okay, so that's when you're practicing, that's throwing them in the fridge. Now let's talk about when you're actually going out hunting. When you're in the woods, you're blowing, I would assume if you're like me, you get several diaphragms going, you're blowing a couple different calls. What do you keep them in? What do you do throughout the day? What do you do once you get either back to your tent camp or your truck camp or whatever you're doing? Obviously, you have an endless supply of calls, so your answer may be a little different than, say, put yourself in the guy's situation that, orders a dozen calls from you and is rotating around, through different calls. Talk a little bit about what should guys be doing.
Yeah, and I will have a lot of calls somewhere in my pack, but I ideally would like to only use the 5 or 6 that are in my call pouch or that I've got out at a time. So during the day of hunting, morning it seems like we're running the calls more, or if it's a good day of hunting, you've got the call in the mouth all day. The best thing you can do for your call is give it a chance to dry out. We use the absolute best materials we can, whether the latex, the frames, the adhesive, on the tape, all of that stuff, we use the best we can, but that stuff is only so water resistant, or the latex, people argue with me all the time, or they have before, that latex can't saturate. Latex will get milky white, get heavy. I don't know if you want to call it saturation or not, but it definitely absorbs, some spit or water from your mouth, and it'll start to lax, just like when you keep them in the bag for a long time. They're exposed to high moisture for extended periods of time, and the call, you'll notice, will just kind of get flat on its face. So when possible, whether I just take the call in my mouth and carry it in my hand as I walk, I like to let those calls air out as much as possible throughout the day. It extends the life, makes sure the tape lasts longer, and it makes sure that the call sounds as accurate as possible. The latex doesn't get heavy. How I store my calls, we've designed a call pouch that hooks. It can hook to any vertical strap, so it can hook to your pack strap or your bino strap. I always recommend people put it on their bino strap, because there are occasions where you may want to drop your pack, drop your backpack, and then you lose your calls with it, versus, a lot of times I don't take my bino harness off until, the end of the day or when I'm not hunting. So we have this pouch, and it's got the kind of the squeeze coin purse hardware that we order, but then we have them custom sewn by a company in Colorado. The front face is a Cordura. The back face actually has a mesh that allows those calls to dry out. Once you drop them in, it will hold anywhere from 6 to 8 diaphragms. You can jam more in there, but things get real tight. So I would say 6 to 8 diaphragms, and it's got a mesh back. And so the call that I use, I always set against that mesh back. It'll allow, and then the call that I'm currently using, you can actually kind of, especially with the amp frame, it's got the, that hybrid plate on it. It'll actually kind of get squeezed in the hardware, and then you kind of let that call just hang out the top and dry a lot faster, because it's basically exposed to the air. And I like to do that as much as possible, but on a good hunting day, that call is going to be in your mouth 90% of the time anyways, and you're just going to have to cross your fingers and hope the call lasts as long as you need it.
Yeah. What? Go ahead.
I was going to say, and then one of the questions we get a lot is I'm getting ready to go on a hunt for X amount of days. How many calls should I need? And so my rule of thumb, and sometimes you get a call that I can use all season, then I only need one. And there's sometimes on a day I'll blow a call out, maybe, that I've been using for a couple of days. So I always like to say, if you're going to, a hunt, get one call for every 3 days that you're going to be hunting. And some guys are like, oh, that seems like a lot. And I'm like, well, you're going on a 10-day hunt, you only need to spend $25, for your calls for the entire trip. And that's kind of that rule of thumb we run by, is if you're going to buy calls, one for every 3 days works.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare that I go out that I have less than 10 on me at all times, and yeah. I usually have 2 or 3 that are kind of my go-tos, that are my honeys, like, just like I defend them, like don't touch them, don't look at them, like Those are my 3 top, those, do not mess with them. But one thing I would tell, I get a lot of people asking me questions on, how to become a better caller, how to make the call sound better, what have you, is I think you hit the nail on the head, and I do it a lot where I'll call, but then I'll actually be holding the call in my hand, or I'll have it out on my lips with the latex being out where I'm actually trying to get air to that latex. I see guys, and I actually know a couple guys that call pretty decent, and they do this, but most of the time I would tell you it's not a good idea. I'm curious your thoughts. They actually just stick it in the cheek of their mouth, and it's just constantly wet, and it's just constantly soaked in saliva. And I find that I cannot be as consistent with that call as if I make a few call, sequences, and then I'm either have it out kind of, between my lips with the latex pointed out, in essence where it's drying, or I just take it out literally. I'm holding it between my two fingers in my hand, and sometimes I'm even kind of waving it, just trying to dry it. Yep. Talk about those guys that you see that probably put it in their cheek and they leave it there all day, how that latex just does not, it's really not how it's designed, and how they can probably get better performance if they do let that latex dry.
Yep, we're exactly the same on that. As I walk, we all typically wave our arms. I'm trying to hold that diaphragm at the end of my hand so that it's getting as much airflow, putting it on biting it out so that the latex is out so that, air can get to it. But there are times where you get a long call in, or you look at the bowl for a long, long time, and I am, cheeking the call or moving the call to my cheek occasionally. And by the time that call is over, I'm still able to sound like an elk, but in my opinion, I've kind of lost the quality that I probably started that calling with. And that's kind of where we get back to that saturation. Some guys say latex, you can't be saturated because it's latex. I will argue with everybody that I can physically show you that this call with natural latex is kind of transparent, kind of see-through, and I can put it in my mouth and hold it in there for an hour and not take it out. When I pull it out, it is milky white and very, very thick and heavy looking. That latex definitely absorbs something when it sits in my mouth. And it makes the call react different. I don't know if I notice it, but I may even have to start calling a little bit different, add more pressure to kind of get it to sound like I want. The guys that carry that call in their mouth all the time, I think, are prematurely kind of wearing that call out as well too, for the long run.
Jason, let's take a quick break here to hear from our sponsors, and we'll dive right back into it.
Guys, we're weeks away from the start of hunting seasons in most states. No doubt you'll have some trips planned. If you're going to be out for longer than a few days, take a look at Canyon Cooler's Outfitter line of premium ice chests. They're going to keep your ice intact for just as long as the other premium coolers, but aren't going to cost you a fortune, leaving more money in your pockets while keeping your food and drinks cold. And here's the deal. There are subtle differences between coolers that you don't really notice until you've used a few of them. What's great about the Outfitter series from Canyon Coolers is they're designed to be flush vertically without the cupcake tops you'll see on other premium coolers. This lets you fit them into tight spaces with ease, and they're not going to get hung up on other gear. It's one of those things you'll really appreciate after you've used them that you don't even realize before. And Canyon Coolers offers the coolers industry's no hassle, no fault, lifetime warranty. No matter what happens to your ice chest, no matter who bought it or how long you've owned it, if the cooler falls out of the back of your truck and you drag it down the highway for 50 miles, all you have to do is send them a picture of the damage, and Canyon will replace or repair the cooler for you. It's the last cooler you'll ever need to buy. It keeps ice just as long, if not longer, than the other premium brands. Costs you less and is backed by an incredible warranty and a Second Amendment supportive company based in Flagstaff, Arizona. And now, just for my podcast listeners, save 10% off Canyon's already low prices and get free shipping by using the promo code JScott at checkout. Check them out at canyoncoolers.com. Guys, I've got an awesome opportunity to tell you about. You can check out the Go Hunt Insider for free for a 30-day free trial right now. All you got to do is go to GoHunt, that's GOHUNT.com/JScott. Look for the blue Start Your Free 30-Day Trial button and click there. This is by far the most valuable tool a Western hunter could give themselves. Insider changes how hunts and hunting information are found. When you go in the Insider, you'll be able to check out the Filtering 2.0 system. You'll also be able to check out the draw odds for each unit, for each animal, for each state. Go Hunt Insider has the best draw odds on the market as far as the most accurate. There's no one that gets as meticulous level of accuracy as Go Hunt Insider. You'll see there's complete coverage of 4,200 different profiles, every unit, every state, every species, every season. In-depth analysis, interactive maps, season trends, unit access, camping and lodging nearby, and historical weather. You'll also be able to see some of the additional benefits, the strategy articles on how to apply, let's say in Arizona for elk, for antelope, for deer. You can go in there and see how in-depth they get. It's an unbelievable opportunity, a free 30-day trial. They also do monthly giveaways, so just by being an Insider member, you get monthly giveaways. They give over $100,000 plus per year of giveaways, gear, tags, hunts. Another unbelievable thing about the Insider is the Go Hunt Gear Shop. So every time you buy something, you accumulate points. In essence, it's giving money back to the Insider. You might ask, well, how does this work with the Go Hunt Insider? How does the 30-day free trial work? You can sign up to try Insider's industry-leading hunting products free for 30 days. They do take your credit card information so that you can automatically become a member once your 30-day trial ends. You can cancel at any time during the 30-day free trial, and it doesn't cost you a dime. You might ask, how is this different from other resources out there? Insider provides analysis and tools for every unit, every species, and every hunt. In each state that they cover, they don't just cover the top 10 units. Their coverage is super in-depth, and you can find those hidden gem units, maybe something that the draw odds are a little bit better, and maybe some quality it's slipped through the cracks, and you might find a great hunt there. Right now, Go Hunt Insider covers Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, Utah, and Wyoming. All you have to do is go to gohunt.com/JScott and check it out now.
You mentioned Dirk Durham. I believe the first time I heard him call was probably about that same time when I was a judge, and I believe you and your wife came down. Dirk's, won all kinds of calling contests. He's a phenomenal caller. And you guys created I believe it's the Maverick Call. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw you and Dirk at Western Hunting Expo, and he had his clicker going, clicking on the amount of times he was bugling. I want to say it was like 1,000 times or something. Talk to me a little bit about, you've got cow calls, you've got bugling calls or bull calls. You've got, calls that can be used for both. And then here you got Dirk who's blown, 1,000 times on a bugle and it still sounds great. If someone's more a cow caller or a bugler, I guess my first question would be, obviously Dirk's blown, 1,000 bugles and it still sounds great. But historically with a mouth call, the more you bugle on a mouth call, historically, doesn't that call tend to not perform as good as you get into the life of the call? I mean, I understand some take a while to break in where you really like them, but historically, you blow 1,000 times on a bugle, it's going to wear out. Talk about that, and then talk about Dirk's call and why he's able, and people that have been buying that call have been able to blow it more than maybe some of the other calls.
Yeah, so we started our most popular diaphragm, which is the amp frame. One of the reasons I think it did so well at market is because it is so easy to use out of package. You can make great cow calls. You can take that same call and make a great bugle with it. The one thing we noticed after a while and putting a couple years of hunting on it is maybe it doesn't last quite as long. There's no way to stop the call from laxing. The latex from relaxing, the latex from stretching a little bit. No matter what we do, We design the frames, we design the adhesives that are inside the frame that get sandwiched, we design the raceway, which actually crimps the latex in, and no matter what I did, it seems like you always get some break-in. The latex always kind of relaxes on you. But so we created this amp line, and it took off. It did really, really well. And then me and Dirk, the next step was, let's make some signature shoes. So I made the personal call that I use. Dirk came on board about that time, and we started working with him on what he wanted in the call. And so when we set out to make these calls, we wanted something that we were proud to put our own names on, but then something we would want. I mean, let's design a call that we need one of, that we can do everything with, and that we would hunt with, or stage call with. When you talk about Dirk and myself, somebody that we can take that call on stage, we'll take out in the woods, and it has all the characteristics we want. So we worked back and forth, and what we ended up doing was just stretching the calls a little bit tighter. We thought through education, when we sell a call, hey, you buy the Maverick, buy the Phelps signature, but realize when you get those out of the package, they may not be, kind of broken. You may have a call that's slightly squeaky for the first 30 or 40 heavy bugles, and then it should kind of break in and settle down. Now, what we were hoping to do with this, and what we actually accomplished by all of our numbers and all of our testing, was we educated people, take this call, don't worry about it being a little bit squeaky right out of the gate, bugle on it 30 or 40 times, and then use the call. What we found is we're getting great life out of these calls. Now, it's not necessarily the best thing as a call maker to make your calls last forever, but it gives the consumer, hope. The consumer has a bunch of confidence in this call now. And what kind of coming full circle, the reason this works is in my belief, is there's a lot of initial break-in in the calls, and then they kind of settle down, and you can't overstress and pass where you've already did in that first 30 bugles. So they kind of just sit still, they set, and they're set where they're at, and then you can use that call for an extended period of time. Versus if you started lighter than that, then they break in, and now your call is almost understretched. And the other thing about Dirk's call, he uses a fairly thick piece of Kelly green latex. And it's kind of funny, all of the coloring and the dye that's added changes some of the properties of the latex. So Dirk, at the very end stage when we designed it, was down between a piece of black latex and green latex, and himself and I could both tell that the green was a little bit quicker latex in the mouth on how it reacted. And I don't know if that's probably not a term we typically use when we're describing latex or alcohols, but we both noticed the black was a little bit lazy on transitioning where the green was quicker. And so ultimately he ended up selecting that thicker piece of green latex. One thing that thicker latex does is it resists tongue pressures or over pressures. So I think we get a little bit better life out of that call as well from people not being able to overstress the latex just by pushing up on it too hard.
That's good stuff. Anytime I've blown anything with black latex, that's the exact word. I don't know that I've thought of that word, but laziness, kind of a dulling effect where it just doesn't seem to have the responsiveness when you go to, put pressure with your tongue as far as getting air through there. It's like it's non-responsive or not as responsive as what I've found. That's very interesting. He's a phenomenal caller. I'm sure having him on board and be able to bounce things, between you and him, bouncing things back and forth, I'm sure it's been a great bonus for you as a call maker, as well as a businessman selling calls. But just from an actual trying to make great calls, I'm sure it's been a great relationship for you.
It has, and I've always been good buddies, with Dirk way back from when I started this thing, and kind of respected where he was at. But more than anything, he's a great guy, and he's fun to be around. He can build the heck out of an alcohol, and there's nothing but the friendship and just a good guy to represent your company is another very very good plus, big plus for us.
That's awesome. I want to ask you a couple questions. historically, you kind of laugh. I typically, for my mouth, blow calls, especially when I'm talking about cow calls, what I blow better are really loose. The looser that the cow call can get, the better that it can get. Talk a little bit about, maybe for people out there, I feel like, I'm not talking about bugling, I'm talking about cow calling. It seems like when that latex, for most, especially for me, but for a lot of people too that I've talked to, when I can get them to get that latex loosened up, even get a little bit of a crinkle, even, when you visually look at it, you can actually see that it's been stretched. And maybe I'm an anomaly. Maybe some of the people, that I've tried to help get better at cow calling, maybe it's just a weird thing, or maybe you agree with it. Why do you think cow calling, or why do you think I can blow a cow call better as it loosens and not a tight stretched latex?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. So we design a call, you barely have any stretch on it, and in my opinion, that makes a better cow call. It's a little bit slower to react, kind of going back to that slow word. We're describing latex, but that call doesn't necessarily want to snap back to where it's at. And so I think that is, in my opinion, when you have, say if you went to the other extreme, you just stretch this latex as tight as you can, and it's squeaky, you can't control the drop from high to low. Yeah. Unless you're, and so, how do I want to describe this? So if we get into say like a medium stretched call, you need to have a fairly reactive tongue and make sure. A lot of callers, I think, they want to drop their tongue too fast or relieve pressure too fast, and they break over too fast and they don't get it. The nice thing about these looser cow calls is that latex doesn't really have anywhere to go. It doesn't want to snap back to where it's at, and so you're able to kind of really feather that transition and find the tone within that pressure drop that you want to get it to sound right. Whereas if we take that call that's tighter, you need to have extreme control over it, and even the best callers in the world can't do that very well. So we'd rather just rely on the latex being looser to do that for us. And in my opinion, that's why cow calls are better looser. And just like you already alluded to, and I just did with our cow calls that we specifically designed for cow calls, are typically very loose latex. From a manufacturer, I have the difficulty in. I think there is a market for cow calls only, but I think the mindset out there is that every call should be good for everything. And so you design a call that can't bugle, and you start to get bad reviews on it. And so it's one of those like weird catch-22s up for a manufacturer. How do I design a cow call that's very, very accurate, but don't get bad reviews because somebody can't bugle on it, or even get close, or the call walks out? So from a manufacturer, it kind of stinks. We've toyed with the idea, and it's been on paper multiple times. Like let's market these as cow-only diaphragms and make it known that they're not meant to be bugled on.
Well, I mean, I think if you wanted my opinion, I think there's a lot of people out there that would be a lot better cow callers if they would blow a lot looser stretched cow call. And if you did, maybe you could do a test run, and I think it would be all in the communication and the marketing of that call. But in general, elk callers in general, I think if they specifically were trying to get better at cow calling and blew a looser call, I think they would be better at it. So with the creation of Phelps game calls, and you have all different types of calls for all different types of animals. Interesting thing to me is not only do you make mouth calls for elk, you make bugles, but you make external reed calls. Talk about the external reed calls, the expansion of that part of the business, and the need in your mind to be able to blow mouth calls well and then blow external reed calls well to have that well-rounded sounds coming out. Talk a little bit about those external reed calls.
Yeah, so the external read is actually the call that I built the entire company off of. At first, I'm like, well, I got a lathe, I got some wood, there's some tone boards. Let's see what we can do. And so that's actually how we started. About 10 years ago. It's just doing the easy estresses, and I had used all kinds of externals up until the point when I started the company. I'd always have, back when I had to buy them, the 5 or 6 diaphragms I'd use for the year. I would have a hyper lip, or a couple different external cow calls, and then I have my Terminator bugle tube. And so we started with that external. I wanted to try to richen the tone, or make a call that's a little bit more nasally for that September hunt. And so we set out to, a lot of it back in that day was we bought some pre-manufactured tone boards, but then as we expanded and wanted to kind of fill in our own line, there was a lot of file work and end mill work, and kind of the quote-unquote old school call maker that had to come out, and I had to kind of become a student of the game for a little bit. Like, what's this curve do? If the curve gets steeper, what's that do? If the curve gets flatter, what's that do? How wide do we want that air slot? So we really worked. We spent a lot of time on that in the first few years because we didn't have a diaphragm press even at that time. It was strictly externals. But in my opinion, no matter how good of a diaphragm caller I am, no matter how much I practice, the reason that external will always have a place in the elk woods for me is because I cannot match that nasally sound that we seem to get off of that mylar reed vibrating that I cannot reproduce with the latex diaphragm in my mouth. And so in my opinion, that's why we'll always carry my easy estrus. We have a new caller that we're going to prototype test this year, a new external that the radius is a little bit different, it reacts a little bit different. But there's some real world reasons why. There's been on a few hunts where I've diaphragm cow called, I tried to do my absolute best all the time, and the thing would not respond. I go to grab that external cow call and old time, the thing hammers back, and he continues to call, respond every time I blow that cow call. And it's like, well, dang, I wonder if I didn't have this thing, if we'd even be in this, be in this situation. And so there's just times, and I can't explain why or how come, that a bull will answer that very, very quickly and doesn't really want to be interested in diaphragm cow calling or even bugling or anything of that nature.
Yeah, they're really good, and it is funny how you can get some elk that really like the external, call, and then some, and then doing them both, you can sound like multiple cows. I mean, if the listeners out there don't blow an external reed call and just do mouth calls, I highly recommend to try it, and they're pretty dang easy to blow and not too hard to master and get pretty good at. So highly recommend that for sure.
Yeah, it's just like that. Having tools in your tool belt. It's not necessarily going to work every time, but it's nice to have it when you need it, and it doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Jason, if you had to point out a couple of things that you think people in their elk calling either A, do wrong, or B, do too much, or seeing mistakes that they make in general, even your own calling, but more specifically, like, what do you think people could really improve on in their own elk calling, or what mistakes do you see that they make that if you could help them out with a few tips that would really bring their game around?
I get the fortune of helping a lot of people. I've always kind of offered it. If you buy calls from us, even if you don't buy calls from us, if you're just struggling to make make clean sounds, send me a video or send me an audio file. And the first thing that always kind of sticks out, and is how much air is slipping by. You just get this, a little bit of elk sound and a lot of air going across the call, and audible air slipping. And first thing we need to do before we can start working on the transitions and sounding like a very, very good elk is get that call cleaned up. Either And there's typically two things that I find create that. People kind of have that lazy tongue. They're not using the back of their tongue to push up against that tape and seal it to the roof of your mouth. The second thing is more a function of the call tape and shape. Some people's mouths and everybody's mouth is slightly different. One thing we've found with the amp frame is that for a lot of guys, the tape is actually a little bit too wide, not necessarily too deep from front edge of latex to back, but the actual, I guess left to right or width is a little bit too wide. And what it's doing is when you go to try to create a seal, it creates spots for air to get by. So one thing we've been working with a lot of people, especially once I hear the videos, once we kind of confirm that they've got things sealed off, is don't hesitate to maybe trim the edges of the tape. Just a little bit goes a long ways. Don't just start hacking into the middle of the tape and taking half the tape away. Just slowly start to work like the left and the right side. Like I say, I think you leave the depth of the call the same, but width-wise, we can start to shave that down a little bit and just to kind of get it off the side of your teeth, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. And
that will
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that seems to clean up probably 90% of the issues we've had. Is that you listen to the file, narrow that up, and a lot of times it'll clean up.
Okay, and that's from a mechanic standpoint of getting better sounds and what have you. What about from the audio files that you get, and then at all the shows, probably people bringing their calls and blowing their calls and asking what do you think, and then as well as out in the woods, some of the stuff you're hearing that the hunters are blowing and they actually are thinking that they're sounding good. From that standpoint, what do you think some of the mistakes that people make in actually, in their elk calling, whether it be situational or whatever they're doing to make those sounds, whether it be the sounds themselves or the frequency or what have you, what are some mistakes that you see continually out there?
Boy, that's tough. It's not necessarily a mistake in the calling. It's more a mistake, I think, in the mentality, especially for new callers or guys that haven't had a lot of success in calling, is they go in extremely timid, and then, they go in timid, they're afraid to call, and then I think they lose a lot of opportunity where, if those of us that know, or those of us that have been around elk enough, we all know that elk don't sound perfect all the time. You don't have to be the perfect sounding elk in order to call a bull. And so I think people just need to be more confident and willing to call first of all. And I know it's not necessarily what they sound like, but don't be afraid to call. Second, I'm trying to think of mistakes. I don't get to hunt. My hunting buddies and partners are all very, very good elk callers, so I'm trying to think of things that, are hunts that I've watched. It's...
How much of it do you think is like calling at the wrong time? Talk a little bit about the timing of your call and how important, in your opinion, not only sounding good, but the timing of your call is super important.
Yeah, so there's a lot of there's a lot of ways to do it, and there's a lot of successful elk hunters that do it different ways. I prescribe more to the temperament and the emotion of that elk I'm trying to call in. So my timing is I try to get those things fired up and kind of seeing red. And we've talked about this. I've always been curious if I could go down into that Arizona, New Mexico, and kind of duplicate and repeat some of the stuff and the successes we've had up here, hunting up north. But my prescriptive way of hunting is to get a bugle, and then the timing is to walk right on top of them. Don't let them get a chance to finish their bugle. We get very, very close. One thing I don't like to do is just sit back 200 or 300 yards away and try to call that bull in. I want some intent on every single call I make. That call is meant to to get that bull to respond or to get that bull to come closer. I'm going to sit here because I hear an elk and hope that he comes in. I'm going to get the wind right. I'm going to try to get as close as possible to that elk, and then deliberately make sounds that should pull him in. And so my typical strategy is to get in tight on that bull, make some cow calls to let him think that his cows are needing attention, and then I usually bugle right after that. And that's typically my strategy. I don't know if that's the best strategy all the time, but it's the way I like to hunt.
So in other words, you're not passive at all. You hear an elk bugle, you try and close the distance, get right in there and mix it up. There's not many circumstances where you're going to do a 30-minute calling session and then wait for an hour or anything like that. You're actively out there trying to pursue, get an elk answer, whether it be a bull or a cow, and then move in from there, trying to determine what you're dealing with and what have you. So you take a very active approach as opposed to a passive approach.
Exactly. Yeah, we're I don't know whether I don't have any patience or what the reason is, but I love that excitement of going after him. How
much of that is driven with the fact that you like to mix it up? You like elk hunting because of elk calling. If elk never bugled, they might not even be on the top 5 of your list of hunts, right? I mean, you like elk hunting as well as I love elk hunting because of that same thing. It's an animal that you can interact with. Talk a little bit about that and your love for mixing it up with them.
It is, and I did a podcast yesterday with Ranella, and the situation came up, and I'll use this as an example, and I think it kind of tells the story exactly where I'm at. So on one side of the ridge, there was a beautiful 6-point bull that was a for sure thing. Like if you were going to go after him, you had a 95% chance of killing him. And on the right side, the other side of the ridge, you had 7 bulls. You couldn't tell what they were, but they were all just going nuts down the timber, bugling their heads off. Ranella wanted to know which side of the ridge I dropped off on. And then I think somewhere in there even said, like, the bulls on none of the bulls on the bugling side of the ridge are going to be bigger than the one on the left, and you have a very good chance of killing them. And my answer was, I'm diving into the bugling bulls. Like I'm there. I'm there to fill the freezer. Don't get me wrong. I love eating elk. I love filling my freezer up. But there's a whole other reason why I'm out there, and hunting bugling bulls is what it's all about.
Yeah, for sure. It's awesome. It's something that if you're a listener out there and you haven't been on an elk hunt, and especially an elk hunt when they're bugling, I highly recommend. I'm sure Jason would get out there, hear your first elk bugle, get some elk calls, and dive in and just enjoy that because it's an unbelievable animal for sure.
Yep.
Jason, I want to take a quick break here to hear from our sponsors, and then I've got some listener questions that have come in, and we'll spend the last few minutes covering a few of these questions, and then I'll let you get back to making some elk calls.
Guys, I want to thank KUIU.com, that's KUIU.com, for their sponsorship of this podcast. And KUIU Ultralight Hunting makes the best ultralight hunting products on the market today. From items like the Peloton 240 full zip hoodie, the Chugach NX rain jacket, and the Super Down Ultra jacket, which will be going on my hunts to the Northwest Territories here soon. If you're talking about KUIU pants, some of the pants that I like are the Guide pant. That's for colder weather hunts, like down in January on my Coues deer hunts. You've got the Tiburon pant for the warm season hunts. That's got the air dock technology where it breathes really well. You've got the Attack pant, which is probably their #1 selling pant. You've got their new Pro pant, which is their all-season, all-terrain hunting pant with a new quiet ultra suede foam lined knee pad. It has 4-way stretch. It only weighs 19.6 ounces. It's got the Toray DWR water repellency. It's got the Toray Make Spec for odor control. KUIU's rain gear is the best on the market in my opinion. I routinely wear the Chugach NX rain pant and rain jacket. I also have worn on some of the lower 48 hunts the Ultra NX rain pant and jacket. Some of the other pieces you've got to check out are the Peloton, which is their synthetic version, either the 130 zip-off bottoms or the 200 zip-off bottoms. They also make them in a 145 merino wool or a 210 zip-off bottom merino wool. These are so convenient. You can leave your boots on, you just drop your pants, unzip your long underwear, and you're off and running again. Another amazing product are the Tiburon shorts. If you see any of the pictures of me in the summer on my Instagram account, 99.9% of the summer I'm wearing Tiburon shorts on all my hiking, all my fishing excursions. It's got the air dot technology. They breathe really well. They're very well fitted, and you guys should check them out. The Tiburon short, fantastic product from KUIU Ultralight Hunting. KUIU has an amazing selection of products from jackets and vests, pants and shorts, shirts and tops, footwear, accessories, lifestyle apparel. They have a wide range of packs from the Icon Pro to the Ultra, the sleep system, the KUIU sleeping bag I use on all my hunts, and then the tents, the Mountain Star 2-person tent, the Storm Star tent, just phenomenal gear. Make sure to go to KUIU, that's KUIU.com, and check out all of the phenomenal gear that they provide. I want to thank the outdoorsmans.com for their sponsorship of my podcast. I want to let you guys know they are the optics authority, and if you're looking for any binoculars, spotting scopes, rifle scopes, make sure to get a hold of the guys at the Outdoorsmans. If you use the JScott promo code, you get a 10% discount on all Outdoorsmans products. Go to outdoorsmans.com, or you can call them at 1-800-291-8065.
Okay, Jason, we got a few questions that have come in, so I'll just read the question and then I'll let you answer. Maybe I'll give my 2 cents on it as well. We've got a question on Instagram. Jason Partridge 91. He says, "Do you find mature bulls shadowing cow-calf groups early in September?"
Yes, and it depends on the area and kind of the timing. Where we're at. A lot of times when I'm out here at home, the younger bulls they'll already be in the herds maybe at the end of August, early September, and then somewhere between, and I'm just going to give approximate dates, it could definitely be outside this range, somewhere between like September 4th and September 8th around home, the bigger bulls, assume the position of herd bull. They'll kind of take the herd over from those smaller bulls that kind of grouped them up. Our spot in Idaho, by the time we get there on, the 8th, the earliest we've hunted our Idaho spot and Montana spot has been the 6th. The big herd bulls were already all in the herd by then. Now, I don't know if that is, I have to assume it probably, the geographic location plays into that sometime, and those bulls knowing from year after year kind of when those cows are going to come into cycle, when they need to be there. But in my experience, like, early September maybe, but by the time, the first 5 or 6 days of September rolls around, I expect those herd bulls or those bigger herd bulls to kind of be in the herd and running the show by that time.
Yeah, and I mean, I would agree with most of what you would say. I would say that, when you get really, really big bulls, when we're talking like really mature and, really big antlered bulls, I've seen them down in Arizona where sometimes they're completely off by themselves. And from a timing standpoint, Jason, like you're talking, 5th, 6th of September, down in Arizona, that might be more, 18th, 19th, 20th of September, where, lots of the smaller bulls have been bugling, there's, all the herd stuff going on, smaller bulls, chasing cows around, what have you. And it just seems like some of those big giant bulls, and I'm talking about, big bodied, big mature, big racked bulls, all of a sudden just come in, and it seems like it's like that, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, and sometimes even later, and just come right into the herd and just take over, start breeding cows. And so when Jason's asking, or Jason Partridge is asking this question, do you find mature bulls shadowing cow-calf groups in early September? My answer would be not really. I find the younger bulls definitely shadowing those cow-calf groups. And then once cows start coming into estrus and start coming into cycle, then boom, all of a sudden, and I'm sure it's like in your country up there, once that happens, all of a sudden the mature bulls, whether they're a big racked bull or, just a big-bodied older bull, a lot of times they just, boom, they show up. And when you see that, you can pretty much bet that, it's game on and you're going to have some fun. Wouldn't you agree, Jason?
Yeah, and going back to an example, you kind of, added some clarification to the really, really big bulls. We had a Washington bull here that we hunted in 2013, and we'd seen him 2 or 3 times, but we would see him for the first 10 minutes of daylight. He would leave the herd of cows and go sneak through a little pass. He'd completely break off from them, like he'd come check them at night. And he did that all the way until he slipped up, like on September 15th. He had no interest in being with that herd of cows, except for at night to check on them. And he was slipping back into his hidey hole. So I guess, when you get into the really, really mature bulls, I think they've just got that extra sense to stay away until it's go time.
Yeah, for sure. I've got a question here from Jacob Bell, and he says, what elevation do you find most of your elk best habitat at? Jason, I'll let you answer that.
So that one, there's not going to be a straight answer, because if you had to ask me that and I had to walk out my front door, I'm sitting at 300-foot elevation here. So there's elk anywhere from 300 to 2,000. I think that question is very, very tough to answer until I figure out where, the spots we hunt in Colorado, we get out of the truck at 9,000 feet. The spots we hunt in Idaho, we get out at 5,000. So it's just, it really depends on the area you're hunting. I don't know exactly how, how to answer that question, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree. Without the context of what state and where you're at, in Arizona, you could be anywhere from 5,000 feet to, 9,000 feet. But I would say in Arizona, you've got a lot of that habitat around that 6,000, 7,000 feet. You've got your ponderosa pine, you've got your pinyon juniper. And then you take the total contrast to that up there in Phelps's country. You've got, I'm sure thick timber and what have you. But, you may only be at 2,500 feet in elevation. So it's completely different. If you're talking Colorado, you're in those zones of 6,000 feet where you've got a lot of oak brush. Say from 55 up to 65, maybe even up to 7, and then you start getting into your aspens and what have you when you get in the 8, 9, 10,000 foot range, and then of course in Colorado you've got you're above 11,000 feet and there's not a tree up there. You're above tree line. So I think it totally depends on what state you're hunting. Even within states, wouldn't you agree, Jason? Like some states have a vast variety of terrain and elevation where you could have some of the best stuff in Montana's out in the flats or way high. So it is a little bit hard. I would say definitely in those states where you've got aspen thickets, that's usually very good elk habitat. In some of your lower terrain where you've got, the oak brush, that's phenomenal habitat. Elk generally like being in that oak brush. I would say even more than habitat is look for good habitat, but, look for areas where you can get away from people, and elk have a great sense of trying, and seems like I find them in places where, there's not tons of people. So I think I would look at some of those areas where, they're not hugely trafficked areas, and typically you'll find more elk. Then you have the exact opposite of that sometimes in Arizona where, you've got Unit 9 where you've got roads everywhere, and, it's pretty much all ponderosa pines and pinyon juniper, and there's kind of elk all over. But in general, across the West, it seems like, those areas where you can get back where, the interaction with people and disturbance of people isn't as bad, seems like that's where you find those pockets of elk.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it's more of a, and that's the same in the units we hunt. It's not necessarily an elevation thing. There are a couple spots, they want to be above tree line or in spots, but it's more of a pressure thing. Or year after year, the elk know they're safe in here, so they go there to rut, and that seems to be a better indicator than sometimes elevation.
Yeah, and Jason, I'm curious your thoughts on when you're picking terrain to hunt. So if you could just, say, this is what I want to hunt, and, it was a perfect world where you could say, I'm going to hunt them in this type of of terrain. Is there a certain type of terrain that, with all other factors, let's say you had a 1,000,000-acre private ranch or something, and you could just say, I wish it was all this, what is there a certain habitat? Like, do you like tight, dense stuff? Do you like, intermixed? Do you like wide open? What do you like to hunt elk in?
I like intermixed timber and parks, or clear cuts or meadows, whatever you want to call it. And that way I got enough vegetation, enough terrain breaks kind of to keep me hidden when I do need to move closer, but then I've got the open and clean enough to shoot and not be tangled up in brush the whole time. So that's, if I could pick the perfect time, it'd be kind of that mixed timber, mixed dark timber, mixed meadows. And then
I'm sure there's times up there in the brush when you're fighting it in some of your country there that you're just like, geez, just get me to some more open country. I mean, I'm sure you have those thoughts from time to time.
Yeah, it is a jungle here, and I've had some buddies, let's go out of state, let's go to like northern Idaho, or let's go to northwest Montana. I'm like, absolutely not. Like, I'm not leaving home. I'm not leaving the jungle here to go to jungle somewhere else. Like, I want to go to somewhere that's wide open and not a piece of brush.
Yeah, exactly. I've got another question here from outfitter_advisors on Instagram. It says, what do you guys do if the bulls are not vocalizing? So I'm going to go ahead and assume that he's talking about, kind of the rut time, September, either a quiet stretch or if the bulls are just not bugling. Jason, what do you do at that point?
So when I get there, the first thing I like to do, if it's a new area or if it's an area I've been to, I'm going to go hit all the known, kind of the hot spots. Like they typically like to feed out in this meadow, or they'll go through this pass on the ridgeline. I'm going to go check those, 3, 4, 5, 10 key spots that I know should give me a good idea what's going on in this area. And just look for sign, look for tracks, look for rubs really quick. And because I'm not willing to sit and dedicate a lot of time to a spot that the elk may not be there, and we've noticed that in some of our spots out of state, whether it's Montana, Idaho. If wolves have moved in there, they can change the dynamics of our spot no matter how good it's been the last 5 years in a row. Something could change in there, and the elk may not be there at that time. So first thing we'll do is go look at the spots and be willing to move or go locate them somewhere else. Rule number 2 is I always like to give a spot the chance. I'll go out at night and locate. After it gets dark, eat my dinner, let the sun go down, let it get slightly dark, and then I'll go out and locate bugle in the areas where I think should be the best, and I should get a response now that it's dark. If that doesn't give me anything, typically I'm almost always going to move spots unless there's something, whether it was scouting or a giant bull that I seen in this area that I know should still be around. I'm going to go find some elk in the unit they're ready to play.
So, I mean, you're taking the approach that you're there to call elk, you're there to interact with elk. If they're not going to play, you're going to pick up shop and go find, after you've checked a few of those spots, you're going to pick up shop and just go find a different part of the unit where you can go interact with them.
Yeah. I at least want to give them a day, especially if it's a spot I've been to and I know it's typically been good or should be good. I'll run the ridge. I'll maybe run the creek, maybe run through some fringes, the meadows, just the edges of them to see, when were elk here last? Are they still here? Can I just not find them? At least give it some time before I pull the plug. But some of the mistakes we made really early on when we started doing this is we would just dedicate way too much time to a spot that looked good, but it was from our computer desk from home, and didn't necessarily mean that there were going to be elk there, and so we wasted days or wasted time getting on elk. Just trying to hold with plan A versus B, C, or D could have been a lot better.
I hear what you're saying. I do have a question from bulls not vocalizing too much, pretty quiet out there. Do you continue to try and bugle, make sounds, or do you clam up as well? I've seen guys go either way, where they just hammer the bugle over and over and over, and nothing's happening. and then I've seen guys go, well, it's quiet, I'm not going to make a sound. Where do you fall in your strategy when you are trying to eliminate, have wolves moved in? Maybe a bunch of people have been hunting here. Do you get more quiet, or do you get more vocal when the bulls are quiet themselves?
So I kind of just run prescriptive. I'm pretty loud. I bugle a lot, regardless of, if it is good, then I'll keep bugling a lot, trying to get something. And if they're not bugling, I kind of prescribe to, well, they just need to hear more bugles so they can answer me. So I typically just keep hammering the bugle. It's just, I don't necessarily do big challenge bugles. I'm just walking the ridge, maybe bugling every 200 to 300 yards, just a quick locator off one side, locator off the other, and continue down. I'm looking for that elk that's kind of ready at that time. There are times where you might get a faint response, and you've got to kind of turn that bull up, but that's typically, I'm just going to bugle a lot regardless if they're quiet, and then if not, I'll go find a new spot. But we don't ever try to. That's tough because you don't know if they're just not answering or they're not elk there. So maybe some of the sign you've seen would let you know that they're elk there, they're just not answering. Then that might be a little bit different. You might have to go to still hunt mode, or if you can figure out where the heck they're at by glassing them or something, you can use some different strategies. But I'm there to try to call bulls in. Now, I'm not saying if your goal is just to kill an elk, that it might not make sense to spot them with the binoculars and then go in and make a move on them. But I want to try to call one of these things in. So I'm looking for that bull that wants to respond.
Yeah, and I totally hear what you're saying. I might give the advice that if someone is listening and they have the same question, the bulls are quiet. If you're the type that, you want to mix it up, you're there to call an elk in, that's bugling or that's coming to the call, then I think you got to totally run and gun, and you've got to move. You got to try a different spot, and maybe come back in a few days or a week and see if that spot's back on again. I would tell you that if the bulls are quiet, and let's say you draw on a premium unit, and at this point you're not just trying to have interactions. You're maybe trying to kill a better bull than what you've already killed, or you've got certain trophy expectations. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think you got to maybe do a little more glassing if the country will allow. Get up high, and sometimes they just go through those lulls where it's just they're right there, but they're just not real active. Maybe they've been pressured. Maybe you just need to give them a break. Sometimes just getting up high, glassing, just kind of listening, looking around, and certainly if there's a specific bull that you want to kill and he's in the area and it's just gotten quiet, give him a day or two. If you're focused in on one or two bulls and that they're right there still in that area, the last thing you want to do is go, just blowing them out. So maybe I would be a little more passive in that situation and just try and, give them a day or two and see if they change their behavior, and then you can get after them. So that's all good stuff. I've got a question here. Oh, go ahead.
Whoops. I was going to say, I talked to a good buddy yesterday about hunting elk in the burn, which is something I've never really done, and that kind of ties into your, give it a couple more days, is, they can visually see these elk every day, and they will not go after them until, like, a cow comes into heat or whatever that day, or into estrus, because the herd's just dead. You've got so many eyes looking at you, but that day where she comes in, it changes everything. And so, and he's like, we'll bugle at them, we'll do nothing. They have zero response. But then that day happens, and he's bugling 100 times by himself, but yet they've been there the entire time. They just have the fortune of being able to see them because they're in a burn, which gives you some idea, alludes to, well, they might be there, where they're just not answering because, nothing's going on.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, a question here. It says bugle or cow call. I don't know if that means if you had to choose one or the other, but maybe let's play that scenario. If I told you could go out for the season, you could only take one or the other, what call are you taking?
Oh, I'm gonna go with the bugle. Like I said, there's some other reasons why I hunt during September. If I just wanted to go, even if I wanted to go kill an elk, I don't know which I'd pick there, but just because of the way I hunt and what I'm out there after, I would pick the bugle. I think I could still be pretty dang effective with the way I hunt and still be, yeah.
And to take that a step further, you're going to choose the bugle. Exactly what tube and exactly what call. What's your go-to? What is your go-to bugle, call, and your tube?
I'll grab. So we've got the new Unrivaled, which is our little guy, and then we have if I have to pick one, not knowing exactly what country I'm going, I'm probably going to grab the big one just so I can have a little more volume, a little bit better projection, and then I'm going to grab probably my personal Phelps signature diaphragm. Now, if I had to just choose one bugle, I would probably I'll take a challenge bugle with me because I can locate with that good enough, and then my strategy requires me to get in close and challenge that bull. So I'm going to take my pink Phelps signature amp frame and a challenge bugle, and that's what I'm going to go elk hunting with that.
Okay. Question here: what is your best call for beginners? And again, obviously we've got cow calls and bugle calls, but you also, your mouth calls, you like to make them where they work for everything. But if you had a beginner, which one of your calls do you usually start them out with?
And so I've got an answer now. I know there's the one there, so I would say pick one or the other. I like to start people with two calls, especially if they're a beginner. And I don't want to sound like a used car salesman or buy one of everything. But there's a specific reason why I want you to. There's a specific reason why I want a new caller to get two calls. As you mentioned, you like your cow calls really loose. So if a new caller grabs a gray amp diaphragm and they realize that their calling style, they're never going to be good with heavy latex, they might have missed the boat completely. Whereas if they've got a black or an orange, which has light loose latex, they may have been a good caller right out of the gate. And so I always recommend getting a black amp and a gray amp diaphragm. And what that does, that kind of puts us at the third point within our line. One more to the higher pitched, easier to use calls, and then one more towards the deeper, a little bit heavier latex calls. And then we'll kind of ask the question, which one worked better for you? What did you like about that one? Did they both work for you? And then I can give better guidance as they pick out their next call or go to put an additional order in.
Good stuff. Question here: what are your elk plans this fall?
So right off the bat, we're going to do Land of the Free 2.0 with the Born and Raised Outdoors guys. We're going to go to Colorado. Myself, Dirk Durham, my hunting buddy Nick Schmidt, and Steve Howard from Born and Raised. Us four will have elk tags. And I think the entire Born and Raised crew is going, Cody and Trent for sure. And
coming down to my neck of the woods.
Yeah, we're heading back to Colorado. That'll be my first time archery elk hunting in Colorado, so that'll be awesome. Fun. And then from there, I'll load up and head back to Idaho. Well, as of right now, it's Idaho. We haven't bought tags yet, but we're kind of watching the fires and seeing what's going on. We'll head back to Idaho, and then I'll hunt there with a couple buddies until the end of September. So pretty much on those two hunts, I'll burn up most of September for me.
Good stuff. How long do you plan on staying in Colorado with the Born and Raised? I mean, is it going to be like a week or 2 weeks, or what's your thoughts?
I think it's planned right now for like a 10-day hunt with all of us. So I think like the 1st to the 11th, somewhere in there.
There's going to be some shenanigans going on then, won't there?
Oh, it's going to be a blast. And it's kind of, 5 years ago I was all about trying to kill bulls, and now I look forward to this hunt specifically because it's just going to be a whole lot of fun, a whole lot of great guys in camp, but I think the elk are still going to be in trouble.
That's good. And then you're going to finish up there in your home state?
Yep, and then we'll muzzleloader hunt. I don't actually have a tag because Washington makes you pick east or west, and I've got enough points now. I've been trying to draw some premium tags on the east side of the state. But we'll get home early October, and a couple of my hunting buddies have muzzleloader tags here early October, so I'll go out and call for them and film for them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Another question here. Tell us about your latest fitness kick as of late. What created that? How's your progress, and what are your goals?
Oh boy. So got done with, as you mentioned earlier, we saw you in Salt Lake City. I got home from that last trip. That was the end of our Sportsman Show tour, and I got on the scale, and I'm like, whoa, that's not good. That's a lot of winter weight.
Your eyes popped out, and you were like, what happened?
Yeah, like that snuck up on me, or maybe it didn't. I just wasn't paying attention, and well, we got to do something about this so that I want to be back into good shape. And there's there's no denying when I'm in better shape. Like you look back, the best shape I was ever in was 2012, and that was by far my best elk hunting season. Like you could say it's a coincidence or not, or there's no correlation, but I'm like, I want to get back in shape. And so then my next, I spent a couple of weeks trying to figure out, do I want to just eat, the salads and, high protein and do that route? And then this whole keto thing kick, I'd been reading about it, hearing about it, and so I decided to just try it. And so it's a pretty high-fat diet, moderate protein, and then very low carbs. And so I did that from the 1st of March until now, and I've lost about 62 pounds, I think, is where I'm at.
Wow.
Right now,
good for you.
I feel really good, have a ton of energy, and get around better in the hills and mountains than I have in a long time. So feeling really good from that side going into this year.
A couple specific questions to follow up on that. Can you talk about from day to day actually what you eat? Like, start me out, wake up, take me through a full day of typically exactly what you're eating.
Okay, so I only eat twice a day. I intermittent fast for like 19 hours a day, and then I eat like in a 5-hour window, or I try to eat in a 5-hour window. So my 2 meals were coming at like 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. And so like a typical lunch at 11 a.m. I would have a whole avocado, like 2 chicken thighs, maybe a handful of pecans, and that might be it for that day. Or I might have some other, elk steak or 2, something to add a little bit more protein into that. And then for dinner, I might come home and cook like a ribeye steak, and that would be it. Maybe some broccoli, maybe some Brussels sprouts, some sort of a vegetable with some high fiber, and that's pretty much what I would eat for the day. And with the high fat, the nice thing is I could make it from 4 o'clock and never really feel hungry again. So it kind of plays with my head a little bit. Back normal eating says, oh, you should eat chicken breast and take the skin off. Now I'm like, I should eat chicken thighs and legs and keep all the skin on. It was kind of a reverse to what you've been taught your whole life. But there was no denying that the weight came off fast, and it continued to come off until I think I kind of settled into a spot here where it's kind of where my body wants to be now.
Do you think that diet, or should I ask, moving forward, are you just going to continue to eat like that, or can you add some other things in that will not put the weight on, where it could be a little bit more, not balanced, but I'm sure you with your eating with your family and stuff, you're kind of in a weird routine. Moving forward, Now that you've lost 62 pounds, are there things that you can do to add in, or timing, or are you still going to continue with that twice-a-day meal habit?
I think I'm going to continue. I feel so much better. Like joint pain, like joint health feels better than it ever has. Mental clarity, like I wake up and feel like I'm on point all the time. So I'm going to do it as long as possible. I may modify it a little bit, add a little bit more protein back in. But I think the carbs, me and carbs just don't get along, outside of vegetables and stuff. So I'm going to try to eat like this as long as possible. We'll see how long I can maintain. Hunting-wise, it was actually the best I've ever felt in the woods when I was on keto. I got to go on a spring bear hunt this year with my buddy, and my legs have never been stronger. I've never had more energy, for a full day, and so I'm really excited. From that side of continuing this journey in the hunting season. The one downside is trying to pack your dang food. It's easy to grab a granola bar. It's tough to pack an avocado type of food in. So there's going to be like coconut oils and weird stuff. I've got to try to figure out how to eat and stuff. But Yeah, my legs felt really, really good on it.
At the same time, Jason, were you doing a lot of training and working out, or was it really this weight loss was really strictly due to diet?
I think the working out definitely helped. I'm pretty convinced though that the weight loss, so I started the diet before I started the gym by about 3 weeks, and I'd already lost probably 12 pounds before I ever stepped in the gym. So I'm pretty sure the weight loss would have come regardless. There's no denying that working out definitely, probably jump started that or turbocharged it a little bit. But yeah, the diet itself, just the more I read about it, the more I learned, I kind of became a nerd about it. I think it's just for certain body types, for certain metabolisms, is just it's the answer.
Awesome, man. That's awesome. Well,
yeah.
I know your time's valuable. I'll let you go. Before you do go, a couple things. I want you to tell the listeners where they can find out more about you, where they can follow you, where they can buy elk calls and all your different game calls. And then if there's any new stuff out there or anything that you want people to know about or remind people about, do so, and then I'll let you go.
Okay. Yeah, no, we're on social media, on Instagram and Facebook mainly, at Phelps Game Calls on Instagram, Phelps Game Calls on Facebook. I'm on Facebook personally too. You can always send me a message there. Our website is www.phelpsgamecalls.com. And really the only thing new we've got outside of the Signature Series diaphragm that we released back in February is that new Unrivaled Bugle Tube, which is a shorty. He's about 17 inches long, weighs about 4.5 ounces, is all compared to the Unleashed Tube, which is 24 inches long and 15.5 ounces. So it's drastically smaller and more packable than that big one, but doesn't give up a whole lot. So that's really all we've got for new products as of right now.
Awesome, man. Well, look forward to following your progress on Instagram. I appreciate you spending some time here with us, and get that bloody nose fixed up, and have a great elk season, and just enjoy it. I know you will, and I always appreciate talking to you here on the podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jay, and good luck this year with all your hunts.
All right, buddy. Take care. God bless.